Welcome to Star Wars Comics in Canon. The Force is strong with this one.
Hello there and welcome to Star Wars Comics in Canon, your guide to the wider Star Wars canon through the comic book lens. And to take you on this journey, I'm your host, Mike Burton. And so brings episode 77. So then guys, here we are for another edition of the War of the Bounty Hunters crossover event, and we are at the penultimate chapter, so it means that next month we'll be at the end of it. Now for any of you who do subscribe to the comics or anything and get them on your doorstep as soon as they come out, you'll know that I think the War of the Bounty Hunters 5 is pretty much finished by the time this gets released, but I want to give any of you comic readers plenty of time to read and digest everything before I talk about all the connections and stuff, or for those other individuals who are just listening along, it also means I have time to read them and digest them and write all these notes rather than frantically trying to release an episode, the moment I get the final comic. But for anyone who is joining me for the first time on this adventure, hello there, welcome. I basically go through the plot details of each of these comics. I give you bonus information about them, trivia, as well as connections to other content, so character information or species, that sort of jazz, and also give you obviously information about the comics, like when they got released and what collections you can buy them in and that sort of thing. I will clarify that the trade paperback collections and stuff will be out eventually, but I think on the final episode of this, when I tackle the fifth and final chapter of the War of the Bounty Hunters, that's when I'll go into all the sort of stuff of where you can buy the trade paperbacks, because that's going to be when everything is finished, and you guys will have loved my podcasts so much that you'll be desperate to buy all of the content, and then you can tell Star Wars and everyone there that I'm the reason that the sales have suddenly jumped up, because that's the kind of reach I have, and that's how passionate you all are of reading these. But with that nonsense out of the way, just to clarify guys, if you haven't listened to the previous episodes on my War of the Bounty Hunters big event, make sure you check out episodes 60, 64, 68 and 72. If you're one of the lucky people listening on YouTube, then this is in a playlist, so you can just go on the War of the Bounty Hunters crossover playlist. It'll have all the episodes in there. And if you are listening on YouTube and you're thinking, I want to be able to lock my phone while listening to this, then just go to any podcast app that you listen to. It can be Acast, it can be Good Pods, it can be Apple Podcasts, it can be Spotify, whatever you want. You can just type in Star Wars Comics in Canon and one of my episodes will pop up, or just type in Comics in Motion, which is the feed this airs on every Saturday, and you'll be able to listen to it on your phone with the ability to lock, unless you're one of those people who've bought YouTube Premium. In that case, I guess it's good for you. I don't know a single person who has bought that, but I hope it makes it all worth it. So let's move on to the reading order of this, which is I think half the reason some of you guys actually tune into this, because it is a bit confusing and I have to keep reminding myself on what order these are. But it starts with Doctor Aphra 14, then War of the Bounty Hunters 4, Darth Vader 16, BOUSHH number 1, Bounty Hunters 16, and then Star Wars 17. And I'd like to remind you guys that Dr. Aphra and Star Wars are on their second runs, which started in 2020. The Darth Vader run is the third run, and that is by Greg Pak. And then Bounty Hunters, it's its own ongoing series. And so you shouldn't have any struggle for understanding which run that goes into, because there's only one of them. So with that all in mind, let's move on to the first comic, which is Dr. Aphra 14. And this issue is called Repeat Offenders. It was released September 8th, 2021. The writer is Alyssa Wong, the artist is Federico Sabbatini, and the colour artist is Rachelle Rosenberg. And here is the crawl. Rogue archaeologist Dr. Aphra and smuggler Sana Starros are working for Dominateg. The job? Infiltrate the most dangerous place in the galaxy, an auction hosted by the resurgent crime syndicate Crimson Dawn. But it wasn't as easy as they expected. Aphra and Sana have landed themselves in the brig of the Vermilion. Good luck getting out of there. I also do like how all of the Dr. Aphra crawls are quite sarcastic instead of the normal ones that are quite, factual and this is what happening and this is what happening. It's kind of like this sarcastic narrator. Who knows? Maybe it's even Dr. Aphra narrating her own life like it is the audiobook. I'm not sure. But with that in mind, let's move on to the story. So as it was confirmed in War of the Bounty Hunters 3, Aphra and Sana were hit pretty hard by a Sentinel bodyguard droid, and they were thrown into a locked cell on the ship, the Vermilion, which is where the whole auction is happening. So in the brig of the Vermilion, with Aphra and Sana, Ariel Yu and Just Lucky are also there in the same cell. They're all wearing exploding wrist cuffs, and then Cray and a Sentinel droid go up to the other side of the shield that's blocking them in and ask Just Lucky and Ariel Yu to reconsider his offer. Ariel Yu is about to tell him to shove it, and Just Lucky quickly interjects and says that we're still thinking about it, and Cray says you basically have until the end of the auction to make your decision. And as a reminder, Cray was the mentor to both Just Lucky and Ariel Yu, and that has been confirmed in the prior episodes of War of the Bounty Hunters. Aphra and Sana confirm that they need to get a distraction going so they can try and escape, because Aphra wants to slice one of those Sentinel bodyguard droids. So, without much warning, Aphra then punches Just Lucky straight in the face. Sana then pulls a lockpick out of her boots and starts trying to undo the wrist cuffs that are on her. Cray and the droid then run in, put the shield down, and then Aphra manages to get on the back of the droid in the commotion, pulls out a bunch of wires and things, and then aims the droid at Cray. Cray has got Ariel Yu held, and he says, if you want to shoot me, you have to go straight through Ariel Yu, and Aphra's like, well, I don't care, I don't even know who this guy is. So she asks for the data necklace and a way off the ship, and she'll spare Cray. Cray says no one escapes Crimson Dawn, so Aphra pulls a little wire, and then the Sentinel droid she's on shoots this beam of energy. Ariel Yu manages to dive out the way, but this beam of energy goes straight through Cray and seemingly kills him, and he just collapses to the floor, smouldering. Ariel Yu looks pretty shocked, but Just Lucky doesn't really seem shocked by Aphra doing this kind of thing, and before they can think much more, they then need to escape, and they work out where they are on the ship is basically the opposite end to where the auction is happening. So they say, let's go across the ship, let's go into the armory in the way there. So they find the armory, they take some blasters and knives and things, and Just Lucky picks up a sniper rifle, which is his weapon of choice. They then comb each room, they go in there trying to find either the necklace or other valuables and things, and then plant explosives in each of these rooms on their way. They get to the art gallery, which is where they were ambushed in the previous issue, and as Sana is about to head in, Qi'ra and Margot then enter. Now, I mentioned Margot before, but just as a reminder, she is an Imrusian. She is described as having chalk skin, and she was actually used as concept art for Qi'ra in Solo, a Star Wars story, but they decided to go with just a standard full human for Qi'ra as opposed to an alien, so they used Margot as another character. She's someone who greets Chewie and Han when they get onto Dryden Voss's ship in Solo. So anyway, Qi'ra and Margot enter this art gallery. They don't see any of the others hiding and things, and Qi'ra mentions that the necklace that she's recovered, which is the one that Aphra stole off the Farlene woman who is a part of Black Sun in the prior issue, and Qi'ra says the necklace is priceless. So she puts it in this glass box and then mentions about making sure no one gets to it, and then leaves the room. And then the final panels of the Dr. Aphra comic shows that Deathstick appears and then confronts Just Lucky. And obviously Deathstick is the Dathomirian Night Sister who is an assassin who works for Crimson Dawn. And she's been popping up all over these issues, causing anyone she runs into a huge amount of trouble. And it says that part will continue in Dr. Aphra 15, which is what I'll be tackling in about 4 or 5 weeks' time. So with that in mind, let's move on to the next issue, which is War of the Bounty Hunters 4. So the issue is called Attack at Dawn. It was also released September 8th, 2021. The writer is Charles Soule. The artist is Luke Ross with help from David Messina. And the colour artist is Neeraj Menon with help from Guru EFX. And here's the crawl. After the Carbonite Frozen Han Solo was delivered to Crimson Dawn, their leader, Qi'ra, fought Darth Vader for ownership of Solo. Now, the current owner, Vader, threatens to destroy Solo if Luke Skywalker does not meet with him. So as the crawl says, it starts off with Vader threatening to kill Han, who is frozen in carbonite. Vader's got his lightsaber in the air and is, making a bit of a scene. Meanwhile, it shows that Leia is panicking. She's talking to Lando and Chewie, and she's trying to calm to Luke. Luke says that he can't fight Vader one-on-one, he just isn't ready yet. So, Leia wants her and Chewie to go in and make a big fuss and try and fight Darth Vader. Lando immediately protests and says, look, we just watched Qi'ra fight Vader and get destroyed, and she's one of the best hand-to-hand fighters I've ever seen. You and Chewie do not have a chance. And then Luke communicates and says that Vader won't kill Han because he's too important, he's got rebel intel and all that sort of other stuff, so he's going to call his bluff. So, Luke communicates to Vader, because obviously there was a connection set up with them via the Star Destroyer like an issue or two ago, and as Luke says, come and get me, Vader then leaves Han and tells the fellow Imperials to put Han onto Vader's Star Destroyer. Meanwhile, it shows Bokku the Hutt and Jabba the Hutt are both kind of arguing. Jabba is just letting the Imperials take Han away, and Bokku is saying that he shouldn't let them do that because it damages our reputation, and you bought him fair and square, and so we can't just let the Empire stamp on us. Jabba says that the relationship with the Empire is far more important than just having Han Solo, and that they've got so many other elements to this which would work better in the long run. Bokku protests, and Jabba basically just says, "Look, I don't really care what you think," and leaves, says goodbye to the rest of the Hutt Council, and goes off. Bokku is absolutely outraged by this, and he talks to the other Hutts. There's a little bit of back and forth, but generally he says that something must be done, they have a reputation to keep, and the other Hutts agree. So the Imperials then move frozen in carbonite Han, and they leave the Crimson Dawn ship and then head towards an Imperial shuttle, which is the T4A Lambda-class shuttle, the very standard Imperial shuttle, the square with the 3 fins on it. So Boba takes aim while this is happening, and then Dengar steps in front of his crosshair. And Dengar says to stop aside because he's holding a gun aimed right at Boba. Boba refuses. He said he's sick of people trying to get him due to the bounty that was on him, and this whole thing has just been a big mess, and that he's just not going to stand down because, as he said, he's just sick of it. It then also confirms that Valance is also there. They both give Boba a final warning, and then Boba flies off with a jetpack and shoots down a missile. The missile hits near Dengar, and then he gets stuck on this floating iceberg thing on this lake, and there seems to be like monsters in the water of the lake. Dengar is like calling out to Boba and Valance, but they're both seemingly ignoring him. Valance has his hand blaster to Fett's head and asks where Han Solo is. Boba points to the shuttle that has taken off and is heading towards the Star Destroyer and said, "Hands on there." Meanwhile, Leia, Lando and Chewie get to the Millennium Falcon, which had been repaired by C-3PO and Lobot in the meantime. They speak to Luke briefly, but Luke is like, "Look, I need to focus because I'm trying to outfly Vader," because you've got Vader's TIE Fighter pursuing Luke's X-Wing, and back to Boba and Valance, they are now talking more. Valance mentions Nakano Lash, which, if you tune into episode 75 of Star Wars Comics and Canon or read the first volume of the Bounty Hunters run, then you'll know what this all refers to, but I'm not going to go into it here. And Valance confirms that he wants to kill Boba Fett because of it. Boba Fett says, "Look, I'm going to die at one point anyway, but for now, why don't we work together? We can stop the Imperials getting Han, and then once we've got Han, then we can figure out whether you shoot me first or I shoot you or whatever. But either way, as long as we stop the Bucketheads from getting him, that's the first step." While this is going on, it shows that Qi'ra is talking to Margo. She mentions that the plan mostly went ahead as they expected, and now the beginning approaches its end. Now, a thing to note here of Qi'ra, some of the panels where she's talking to Margo and stuff shows that she actually still has multiple artifacts from Dryden Voss's collection. This includes a Sith holocron, a dancing goddess, and a skull of Zim the Despot. Now, the skull of Zim the Despot, that is what we think, a big nod to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the 4th Indiana Jones movie that I know many of you listeners would rather forget. And a Sith holocron, I've spoken about holocrons quite a lot in these, but if you want to know, the most recent time I spoke about holocrons was actually the last episode of Star Wars Comics and Canon, so go check that out if you want to know about those. And the Dancing Goddess is something which you can actually see, funnily enough, in the Tales from Vader's Castle comics that I tackled in the last episode, so if you want to find out about holocrons as well, do that. But I didn't actually mention the Dancing Goddess because you see it in like one panel in the background, and I can't mention literally every single reference in the whole of every comic, otherwise every episode would be like several hours long. But it's quite interesting that by pure accident I managed to put these two episodes next to each other without even realising the Dancing Goddess was even in Vader's Castle when I kind of did this element of it. I had to go back and look. But also in Dok-Ondar's Den of Antiquities, which is in the Galaxy's Edge comics I tackled ages ago, and if you go to Galaxy's Edge and go to Dok-Ondar's place, then you should be able to see the Dancing Goddess statue there. It also appears in like bits and pieces elsewhere, but in Solo: A Star Wars Story it seemingly gets destroyed, so it's unclear if there's multiple versions of these or if it got repaired or what. But yeah, you see the Dancing Goddess, a Sith holocron, and then a skull that looks like the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Anyway, after Qi'ra talks to Margo and stuff, it shows that the Millennium Falcon is approaching the Imperial shuttle. Lobot manages to shut down the Imperial shuttle because with his implant he still has loads of connections to Imperial tech, and Boba and Valance are flying behind them in the Slave One. Boba lets off a seismic charge, but only at 20%, and it stuns the Millennium Falcon. And then the final panels of this shows that Bokku the Hutt and loads of ships all emerge to try and take on the currently stunned Imperial shuttle. And you see Boba Fett is not overly happy by this, and that is where War of the Bounty Hunters number 4 ends. Now, quick mention here, the seismic charge, you get to see that in Attack of the Clones. It is one of those moments that everyone seems to love in that film where the sound of it is just incredible. It's when Jango and Boba are being pursued by Obi-Wan as they go towards, I think, Geonosis, let off a seismic charge and it blows up all those asteroids and stuff. It's there. It also pops up in The Mandalorian as well, which is a bit of fun. But yeah, seismic charge at 100% will decimate a lot of stuff. So only at 20% being a stun. We should count the guys in the Millennium Falcon lucky, because Return of the Jedi would be a very different film if they got blown up by a seismic charge within a year before that. But with that in mind, guys, let's move on to the next comic, which is Darth Vader number 16. So it's named Target Skywalker. It was released September 15th, 2021. The writer is Greg Pak, the artist is Raffaele Ienco, and the colour artists are Jason Keith and Rachelle Rosenberg. And here's the crawl. After testing the loyalty of his servant Ochi, Darth Vader boarded the Crimson Dawn's ship, the Vermilion, to claim Han Solo. To draw out Luke Skywalker, Vader threatens to destroy Solo if he does not face him. So this comic, much like the other Darth Vader comics from the 2020 run, are quite vision-based is how I describe them, so they benefit greatly from you guys reading them because a lot of the elements here are quite visual parts. But it starts off with Vader saying to Luke that he wants a father, but he won't find one in him, and then it shows Vader cutting an image of old Ben Kenobi in half. Vader then continues and says that Luke just wants to hide away in his friends, but that he cannot escape who he is. And then Vader says to come to him or he'll be lost. And then there's an image of them Palpatine splitting the image of Vader, similarly to the way that Vader split the image of Ben. So then outside this sort of vision realm, it shows that Vader is literally speaking to Luke over the communications and stuff. Vader is threatening to cut Han in half, and so Luke's X-Wing then leaves the area and basically tells Vader to follow him, and the Star Destroyer tells Vader that Luke has left. Luke then confirms to Leia that Vader wants Luke to join him, so then Luke flies the ship further, and then this other ship nearby uses Magna harpoons to grab the X-Wing. Before they can reel him in and do any real damage, then some shots go past Luke and hit the ship that's trying to grab him. It shows it is Vader in his TIE fighter. Then after the Magna harpoon ship is dealt with, Vader then starts to pursue Luke. He starts to shoot around Luke and does actually land a couple of blows, and so Luke's X-Wing lands back on Qi'ra. And while this is happening, it shows that Boku the Hutt is still annoyed about how Vader just stormed in and took what he believes to be the Hutt's property. So Boku is annoyed, he speaks to Ochi as Imperials take Solo, and then Ochi, like halfway through the conversation, just kind of leaves as he sees Sly Moore, the Umbarum. And then Sly communicates to Vader, and without really saying a huge amount, the droid Crush land on his shuttle, while Ochi then attacks Sly. Now the droid Crush, they're droids for hire in essence. There's a bit more information to them, but that is tackled in the first volume of the 2020 Darth Vader run, which is something that I am going to be tackling in 3 weeks' time. But obviously, you're welcome to pick up those comics to find out, but going into their backstory here is a bit much, considering I'm going to do it in a couple of weeks anyway. So you've got Ochi, who is now attacking Sly Moore, calling her a traitor, and she said that she is loyal to the Emperor, that's who she serves, while the droid Crush are now attacking Vader's ship, but are also repairing Luke's ship, which is an X-Wing that is now on the ground of Qi'ra. They confirm that they are hired by the Empire, and then Vader starts to shoot down at them, and Luke quickly gets back into the X-Wing and takes off, with these droids standing on his ship. Vader seems to have got rid of the droids that was on his ship, so he is now pursuing Luke's X-Wing. Ochi and Sly Moore continue to fight. They're now using knives each, so they're having a knife fight, and Ochi says that Vader needs the rebel that they're trying to get. Sly says the only reason he wants the rebel is because Palpatine wants him, and if Palpatine got this rebel, who is seemingly very powerful in the Force, he wouldn't need Vader anymore. She then stabs Ochi with the knife. He communicates to Vader while he's crouched on the floor, and Vader says to kill Sly. Ochi says, I'm trying, but also the Hutts are going after the Imperial shuttle that has Han on it. And then the last page I don't fully understand, but the shuttle that Han is on seems to explode, and then Luke yells out, and then Vader says that he can sense his anguish and is shown flying the TIE fighter behind the X-Wing, and that is where that comic ends. And the reason it confuses me is because there's another 3 comics after this, one of which is the Star Wars comic, which you get perspective from Luke, and it doesn't really seem to show the ship that Han is on exploding. So Not really sure what that is. I don't know if I'm missing something or if they're meant to make us think that that's what's exploded, and then in the next issue it's going to be like, oh no, it didn't explode. Either way, I'm not overly a fan of that little element. I want to clarify. It's just, I don't know, it seems unnecessary, but maybe I'm misinterpreting it. Who knows? With that in mind, let's move on to the companion comic of this chapter, as I call them, and this is BOUSHH number 1. So BOUSHH 1 is called Found. It was also released September 15th, 2021. The writer is Alyssa Wong, the artist is David Baldeòn, and the colour artist is Israel Silva. And here's the crawl. When a dangerous job needs doing, the crime lords and underworld power brokers call the WoBH bounty hunter known as BOUSHH. The war of the bounty hunters rages between Boba Fett, Crimson Dawn, and the great powers of the galaxy. The acquisition of smuggler Han Solo is just one of Crimson Dawn's many nefarious plans. Their rise has disrupted the delicate balance of power, threatening to usurp Domina Taig's position. So, as the crawl said, BOUSHH is a WoBH. I don't believe that we've seen any WoBHs with their helmets off or anything, and that does kind of get tackled in this comic, but you guys may not recognise the name BOUSHH, but you've definitely seen them. Well, somewhat. Basically, when Leia goes into Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi and she's disguised as a bounty hunter, the person she's disguised as is BOUSHH. And I believe that she's speaking WoBHs when she talks to Jabba, and she's wearing his full outfit. And she is the same height and general size as BOUSHH is, so the outfit works quite well. Now, oddly enough, there is a Forces of Destiny cartoon, I think it is, so you can view these on YouTube and I think on Disney Plus as well. They're normally like 2 or 3 minutes long, and they're just, they're aimed for like really, really young kids. But there is a story of how Leia got BOUSHH's outfit. From what I remember, she's with Chewie and Maz Kanata, and then BOUSHH kind of attacks them, and they manage to beat him, and then she steals his armor. That's like the long and the short of it. But this comic doesn't go into any of that. I don't know if this comic, or rather the War of the Bounty Hunters, is going to kind of touch on that, or if the Forces of Destiny episode is going to be the only canon source to confirm that, because obviously Forces of Destiny has its aim for such young kids, and also not that many people seem to watch it, to my knowledge, who are, Star Wars canon buffs. I don't know if they're going to retell that story, but who knows? If they do, I'm sure we'll tackle it on this show. So it starts off with BOUSHH and 4 other WoBHs who basically kill a bunch of people who are trying to obtain and trying to sell a Black Sun speeder. So it's basically like I describe it almost like a drug deal. So they've gone to this really dodgy place, there's a few people who are trying to buy the speeder, and there's some people trying to sell the speeder. So BOUSHH and the other 4 WoBHs kill all these people, and just so you know, one of those people is a Snivian. Now the reason I bring this up is they are kind of like pig people. So you've got Ugnaughts, who are like really, really short, small pig people, and then you've got slightly more maybe boar people as a description. So they're humanoid, they are standard sort of height as air quotes normal humans, and you can actually see one of them in A New Hope. They're in most of the animated shows, Resistance, Clone Wars, and Rebels from what I remember, but they're kind of side characters and things. But for any of you fans who've been with Star Wars for a bit longer than maybe I have, you may know the species as a snaggletooth, because there's a character who's in the Mos Eisley Cantina, and the action figure that got released as him was called Snaggletooth before, they decided to name every single species and name every character and all that sort of stuff. That was just his name. So a little bit of fun trivia for you there. Anyway, after BOUSHH and co. kill all those people, they then go to the Black Sun, because it was Black Sun speeder, get some reward, and then leave. And someone who greets them on the way there is someone called Devar Lompop. Now, Devar has appeared in each of these companion comics to War of the Bounty Hunters. So there was the Jabba the Hutt one, there was the Forlom and Zuckuss one, and now there's this one. I presume she's going to pop up in the IG-88 comic as well. She is a Shani species, and she's really old. She's like hundreds of years old. She's been about since the High Republic era. She's like a reptilian humanoid. She has feathers on the top of her head. She can open her jaw massively like a snake, and she seems to be quite intelligent and incredibly deadly. I would love more information about her. I don't know if they're going to do like a little comic series of her, or if they're going to do something annoying like kill her off in the IG-88 comic, or she's going to appear elsewhere. But I think I'd really like a comic series about her and her life. She seems like a very interesting character, and to my knowledge, the species hasn't shown up elsewhere in the canon. So if you want information on Devar Lompop, read the other Bounty Hunters companion comics. I think the Jabba the Hutt one gives the most amount of information to her, but as I said, she does pop up in the Forlom and Zuckuss one. Or you guys can just listen to all episodes of Star Wars Comics in Canon and go back and listen to those previous ones where I give a bit more information about her there. She doesn't really say much to BOUSHH. To clarify, she's just there for like a panel or two and then isn't in this comic anymore. I just want to highlight her. So BOUSHH and his gang, there are 4 others and they all do have names, but I'm not going to go into their names. It's not explicitly relevant here. And maybe if they pop up elsewhere, I'll give you guys more information when that time comes, but it just is basically BOUSHH and his crew of other WoBH people. So BOUSHH mentions a character called Keln and says that Keln would have been 12 years old. The group around him all say that they're really sorry and, you know, it's an upsetting thing, and then they all go to a bar and they discuss their own exiles. So it's confirmed that all traces of them got removed from WoBH's public records, their families won't even speak their names, and they wear armor and the helmets to mask their shame. It shows like a flashback with BOUSHH, but it's not really clear what actually happened. There's like 2 panels and there's just a lot of fire and some silhouettes, and then someone says like, BOUSHH, what have you done? So not really sure. We don't know if we're going to get more backstory to BOUSHH there, or this is all we're going to get for now, but you know, tragedy in a Star Wars backstory is fairly commonplace. So now they go to Crimson Dawn after going to that bar and talk to Margot, who tells them to kill 8 members of the Taig Corporation's executive board, especially targeting Domina Taig, and they say that they'll get 200,000 credits for doing this job, to which they accept, which is about 25 grand per person they kill, which is a huge amount for a bounty. So Domina Taig is someone who, if you've been following along with the War of the Bounty Hunters and especially the 2020 Aphra run that I've done in previous episodes, then you'll know that Domina Taig is the current head of the Taig Corporation. She is a very fierce individual. She doesn't really seem to be scared of anyone or anything. And the Taigs are someone who supply weapons and ships and a lot of stuff to the Empire as a whole. And her sibling, I think brother, Cassio Taig, you see him in A New Hope. He's one of the Imperial officers in the sort of boardroomy part near the start, and he tells them, you know, not to put too much faith in the Death Star, that what if the rebels have got the plans, you know, there could be a weak spot, and he basically gets told by Tarkin that no, there won't be. But he does show up in the 2015 Darth Vader comics written by Kieran Gillen, and you get a whole lot more story involving him, so you know, you can check out previous episodes of Star Wars Comics and Canon for that. But anyway, Domina Taig, at the moment, she is trying out a plasma blade, or a proto-blade. They call it both things in the space of like 2 panels. So, you know, it's basically just like their own version of a lightsaber. She tests it on a couple of guards and is fighting them and things, and she really beats these guards. And like afterwards, she isn't even out of breath, and they're all like panting and out of breath, showing that she can really, really handle herself. But the Taig Corporation is trying to replicate a lightsaber, obviously without using a lightsaber crystal, or so we think. They haven't mentioned a lightsaber crystal, so one would assume it hasn't been used. And Domina mentions that she had a couple of assassination attempts on her when she was young, and since then she's really made sure she can take care of herself because her family are Vipers. Now, there's a scene here, and you've got several heads of the Taig Corporation, all with their own roles and names and things. Now, their names aren't explicitly relevant. I think only really 2 of them have anything else to add to this story. But I just want to read them out to you just as a world-building perspective, just to see what kind of things happen in a massive corporation in Star Wars. I just think it's quite interesting. So, just going to read these out for you. Ormond Taig, head of manufacturing. Ulrich Taig, head of public relations and messaging. Adelaide and Felix Taig, heads of finance. Brace Taig Falklin, Imperial officer. Layla Taig Falklin, head of talent acquisition. And Silas Taig, head of weapons development. So in essence, the family are all squabbling and things because Domina has like the final say on everything because she's seemingly the CEO, and you know, some of them are saying, oh, we need more money for this thing. And someone else is like, no, you waste money doing that stupidly. You should have put money in this thing. And, you know, they're just squabbling simultaneously as a family would, but also as a board of directors would. And after a bit of squabbling, one of them says about there being spies. They all seem to be quite outraged in this. And Domina says, yeah, there are clearly spies here. There are moles in the corporation. I'm trying to get them out. But I'm obviously not going to tell you all about it yet. And before anything else can really get divulged, some alarms sound. It shows that BOUSHH and crew attack, and they lock the Taigs into a room. Domina cuts out a square out of the front door using her proto-blade, and it shows that BOUSHH and crew, they open up like a door, and there's a lot of people cowering in there. They all seem to be quite young people, and they don't want to kill all these young people unnecessarily, so they just kind of leave them there. In that air of distraction, Domina then takes out those 2 members who opened that door and then decided they didn't want to hurt the young people. I'm quite confused at this bit because it looks like she shoves the protoblade through the chest of one of these crew members, and then in the next couple of panels they seem to be fine. I don't really understand. Either the drawing is a little bit... Well, I mean, the drawings are all excellent. I want to clarify the artwork in this is amazing, but I'm just not overly sure. Did she stab this person through the middle? And if they did, how are they surviving? Do the UBs have like a biology that I don't understand? I'm not really sure, but it looks like she kills them and then they're just fine in the next couple of panels. So she KOs them, let's say. The 3 others of BOUSHH's crew, including BOUSHH, then go to the meeting door. They manage to open it from the outside, and then as the doors open, lots of shots fire. Silas slides out and just basically runs away, and then they are shooting at him, he falls to the ground, and then he confirms that he actually hired them. He wanted to get all of his family eliminated because they're in the way, especially Domina. And then Domina approaches. She confirms that she knew about Silas. It was between him and 2 other members of the family that she was sure about, so she put this meeting together specifically to encourage him to do something like that so that she could catch him in the act. Domina manages to disarm all of BOUSHH's crew, including BOUSHH, and then kills Silas in front of them, but at this moment in time, they are alone, as in there's no other Tags and no other Imperials around them. She mentions that the UBs are isolationist, and although they're very hard to get into contact with, she actually has a contact with the UBs people and supplies them with a certain amount of things. So she says that she offers to give them 300,000 credits to then not kill all of the people there at the Tag Corp, and asks for them to confirm to her who their real employer was, and also she'll try and help them go back to their home planet of Uber 4. They kind of talk amongst themselves a little bit, and she confirms that she has connections and things, and then they accept and tell her that it was Crimson Dawn, and that is where BOUSHH number 1 ends. Now I want to clarify, I really shot through that. This is quite a chunky comic, I think it's over 30 pages, and there is a lot going on, there's loads of action, there's a huge amount of dialogue, so I would recommend of all these comics, Darth Vader probably does the best at requiring someone to look at things visually, but if you want to know a bit more about BOUSHH and Domina Tag and things, I do recommend picking up this comic. It is a really good one, but I can't read out absolutely everything because this is a very full to the brim comic of stuff. So yeah, with that in mind, obviously BOUSHH is going to pop up again, potentially more The Bounty Hunters 5 or wherever this goes. I know there's going to be a Crimson Dawn comic mini-series, which is probably going to be some sort of sequel to The War of the Bounty Hunters to probably just delve into Crimson Dawn a bit more. But with that in mind, let's move on to the next comic, which is Bounty Hunters number 16. So Bounty Hunters 16 is called Shadow Soldiers. It was released September 22nd, 2021. The writer is Ethan Sachs, the artist is Paolo Villanelli, and the colour artist is Arif Prianto. And I want to add in here that I had a conversation with Paolo Villanelli for about an hour. It was excellent and is getting released the day after this episode airs, so it should be out November 7th on the feed of Genuine Chit-Chat. And if you are on YouTube listening to this episode, then I believe the video version of my chat with Paolo should be up as well. So make sure you subscribe to Genuine Chit-Chat, or if you're on YouTube, subscribe there and then check out that video. But with that in mind, let's get on to the crawl of Bounty Hunters 16. Jabba the Hutt has put a bounty on Boba Fett's head. Valance and Dengar are determined to find Fett first. Valance is desperate to save his old friend Han Solo, who is in the hands of Crimson Dawn, and Dengar has an agenda of his own. Meanwhile, Taonga and Losha found the Mourner's Whale Syndicate decimated by Crimson Dawn. Taonga won't rest until the heir of the Mourner's Whale and Unbroken clan is safe. On Nar Shaddaa, Valance was wounded by a Crimson Dawn assassin, Deathstick. Dengar and Valance managed to narrowly escape, but time is running out to find Han and Fett. So regarding the plot of this, on Dengar's ship, the Punishing One, Valance contacts a guy called Condra. Now, Condra is a rebel lieutenant. He's actually Qi'ra's husband and is in the second volume of the Bounty Hunters comics, which I have not yet tackled on this show. I have tackled volume 1, which was 2 episodes ago on episode 75, and that does give some backstory more to Valance and things. I go into a lot more detail about that, and also Nakano Lash is mentioned in this as well, with Boba Fett, and that whole sort of story is volume 1 of Bounty Hunters. So to find out more about Condra, either pick up the second volume of all the Bounty Hunters or just wait about 4 weeks, I think, 3 or 4 weeks, and then I'll have tackled it. But it's not explicitly important to the story. That is more or less all you need to know about Condra. And Valance then proceeds to say that he's contacting him on an old smuggler frequency that no one should know about, and he tells Condra to look after Qi'ra and Cadelia. And Qi'ra, Condra, and Cadelia are at a hidden rebel base. Then Dengar and Valance arrive at Qi'ra. Meanwhile, Taonga, Losha, and Tasu are with Zuckuss. Now, Tasu is Tasu Leech. He is from The Force Awakens in Kanja Club, and I gave more information of his backstory in the previous episode of War of the Bounty Hunters, which was episode 72. But yeah, you'd recognise him as one of the guys from the raid in The Force Awakens, who gets killed by a Rathtar. And I'm sure you may be thinking, if you listen to my episode of Bounty Hunters, didn't Taonga die? And that's what we're led to believe. I can't actually 100% remember how she isn't dead, but I'm pretty certain that in Volume 2 of Bounty Hunter she just gets healed or something like that. But it will be explained. Not in this episode, in the future. So anyway, the crew are with Zuckuss, and Zuckuss has got a tracker on Dengar's ship, so they head there. Zuckuss makes a comment that he puts trackers on all of his bounty hunter rivals' ships without them knowing. So on Qi'ra, it shows that Bossk is still tied up after his run-in with Boba Fett in, I think, the 3rd sort of volume of War of the Bounty Hunters. Dengar and Valance stake out the area. They notice Bossk is there and just leave him, and they stake out the area, kill a few guards and things quietly so they don't alarm anyone else, and then wait nearby for Boba Fett to show so they can get him and find out where Han Solo is. After a while, Boba Fett then appears, so Dengar goes to approach him. Meanwhile, it shows that Vakora of the Unbroken clan is on the ship of Crimson Dawns called the Vermilion and talks to Margot and drinks a bit of spice wine. I think it's just kind of showing that she's there. She's the person who Sana Starros shot in the eye in the Doctor Aphra comic, which I think was the prelude, the sort of comic that ran into the War of the Bounty Hunters. And Vakora has popped up before. She's a nasty piece of work, which is what a lot of people would say, but she's a very mean, sadistic person who'll kill anyone in her way. Anyway, back to Dengar. So Dengar is speaking with Boba, the kind of conversation you would have heard about or you'll have read in War of the Bounty Hunters 4 earlier on in this episode. And then Valance appears, and then the three of them are about to kind of fight, but then Boba Fett flies off in his jetpack, shoots down a missile, and then Dengar gets trapped on that ice block on that lake. T'Onga and her crew are now on Qi'ra, and they find Bossk. He seems to be dead, but when they're kind of talking or standing near him, he grabs a knife that was on Zuckuss's belt and then frees himself. He gets out and then grabs Tassu, and he says, "I'm going to kill you, and then I'm going to go find Boba Fett and Valance." And then they're like, "Wait, did you say Valance?" Because obviously that's who they're looking for. So, back to Valance. Valance is now flying in the Slave One with Boba Fett after they had that conversation, which I explained in War of the Bounty Hunters 4. They see Dengar waving on the ice block, and then Dengar says to himself that he was actually going to betray Valance, but Valance didn't know that, so he's a bit offended that he got left there. Then this monster jumps out the water and is about to attack Dengar. The monster is called a Zuggurak. It looks like a giant squid thing, kind of like a kraken in some ways, but it's not elsewhere in the canon. It just kind of has a cool name. And before Dengar has like a chance to fight it or anything, a hole is blown out of this Zuggurak, and it shows that Deathstick is there, and she fired a cannon that kills it. Dengar is thankful, and Deathstick says the only reason you're alive is because you're going to help me. And so Dengar gives her the frequency of where Valance sent that transmission earlier on in this comic to where Cadelia is. And so Deathstick says once they get their hands on Cadelia, Crimson Dawn's victory is near. And that is where Bounty Hunters number 16 ends. So with that, my friends, we move on to the final comic of the 4th volume of War of the Bounty Hunters, and this is Star Wars number 17. It is called The Chase. It was released September 29th, 2021. It was written by Charles Soule, the artist is Ramon Rosanas, and the colour artist is Rachelle Rosenberg. And here is the final crawl of this episode. Darth Vader has claimed the Carbonite-imprisoned Han Solo for himself and threatened to destroy Solo to draw Luke Skywalker out. Luke approached, then quickly fled, leading Vader away from the Vermilion and Solo. Now, Luke must keep Vader at bay while Leia attempts to save her love, Han Solo. So obviously, as I've said in previous episodes of War of the Bounty Hunters, there is a lot of overlap. I think it's trying to be in a kind of way where if people are only reading the Star Wars comics, then they can still get a gist of what's going on. But when you're someone like myself who gets every Star Wars comic in the canon and wants to share it all with you guys, there is going to be a degree of overlap. But I think in this one especially, they've done quite a good job of giving like bits and pieces more information. It's almost like all of the bits strung together as like an extended version of events, because it's like you see it in War of the Bounty Hunters and then you see it again in another comic with like an extra 2 or 3 lines of dialogue. So just want to clarify that. Each time this comic starts, it kind of reset a little bit from where the last comic ended. But with that in mind, let's get into it. So Luke is flying his X-Wing on Qi'ra, and Vader's TIE seems to be distorting his sensors. Then Vader's TIE emerges from water, flies up, is giving chase to Luke, and Vader then comms to him and says that Luke only survived due to Solo, and Solo can't help him now. Luke notes that the water froze immediately after Vader emerged from it, so he has an idea. He then skims the water while Vader's pursuing him. He skims the water as Vader is pursuing him, turns quite sharply and creates an ice wall, which Vader crashes into. So Vader's TIE crashes and then is seemingly out of action, so Luke's X-Wing then approaches, looks like he's going to take aim and shoot at Vader, but then decides not to. Vader had ignited his lightsaber anyway, but Luke decides that he wasn't ready to shoot him. He comms to the Millennium Falcon, which is just floating in space after being stunned by the seismic blast, at like 20% that was confirmed in War of the Bounty Hunters 4, and they're currently trying to get their ship repaired. Luke mentions that Vader crashed, but then you see that Vader uses the Force to lift the TIE fighter out from the ice and the rocks, manages to kind of shake it a little bit, it seems like, maybe even buff out some of the damage it's had, and then it starts to float again. Meanwhile, Leia begs Lando and Chewie to fix things faster. Lando mentions that Boba Fett knocked out the Millennium Falcon, and so he tries to locate the error on the ship by powering up the diagnostic systems. Meanwhile, the Hutt ships appear around the Falcon and things, and then approach the Imperial shuttle that has Han Solo on it. Lando, then walking around the ship, mentions about the node in the processor. He says he needs to ensure that the correct switches are sorted. Leia offers to help, but Lando says, no, I'll do it, and he climbs into a maintenance hatch. So he goes into this area, and there's like these energy surges because there's something wrong that the Millennium Falcon has to like let out some of the excess energy to stop the ship from exploding. So he goes under there, starts repairing the ship and things, and then while he's doing that, he starts talking to L337, saying that he wants to help people now. Now, L337, she is the eccentric droid from the Solo movie, and if you want a bit more backstory to her, because she's a very interesting character, and it is actually a shame what happened to her in Solo. I quite like the fact that her consciousness was kind of put into the Millennium Falcon, and that kind of explains why the Millennium Falcon's got a bit of sass, and that's kind of what I think 3PO mentions in, I believe it's Empire Strikes Back. It might be in Return of the Jedi, but I think it is Empire, where he's like, oh, this, the ship on this computer is very rude and things, but then R2 can communicate with her fine, because, R2's a bit cheeky. I quite like that element, but if you wanted more backstory to L337, more than you get in Solo: A Star Wars Story, then check out the Lando Double or Nothing comics. I tackled that in episode 37 of Star Wars Comics in Canon, and if you want even more information about Lando and his relationship with Lobot, then check out the prequel to A New Hope, which was just called Lando, written by Charles Soule, and that is episode 18 of Star Wars Comics in Canon. Or obviously if you're reading on Marvel Unlimited or whatever, then check out the Lando Double or Nothing comic. It's pretty good. If you like Donald Glover's Lando, then it's great for you. If you prefer Billy D. Williams' Lando, then check out the prequel comic, as I mentioned prior. So yeah, Lando's talking to L337 while sorting out the ship, and then the ship's diagnostics come online. Leia and Chewie are nearby. Chewie pulls him out of the maintenance hatch, and then he says, look, you guys go, I need to sort out one more thing here. And then he just has a moment to himself, sits there and thanks L337, which is a really nice moment. So the diagnostics say to repair the vital systems, so Chewie goes around and starts to repair the systems that the ship tells him to. Then it shows that Vader emerges in his TIE fighter and is now chasing Luke once again. So now Leia and Lando talk quite a bit. Lando mentions that Chewie is the best mechanic he's ever met, and then Leia thanks Lando for going into that maintenance hatch, because if that energy had surged at the time where Lando was in there, it could have killed him. Lando says that he isn't actually selfish, that he will get involved in things when it's someone or something he truly cares about. He says that he doesn't like the impression of just like he's out for himself and is completely awful. And then Leia says to him that, yeah, we agree with you completely in that you want to do something when it's about someone or something you care about, but that's what the rebellion is. She calls it the biggest gamble of all time. And Lando says, oh, you're good. So the Millennium Falcon is then online, Lando gets to the cockpit and Leia goes on the guns, and Lando says just before he leaves the room, let's go get Han. We're his only hope. And that's where issue 17 of Star Wars ends, and the final comic in the 4th chapter of the War of the Bounty Hunters comics. Now, obviously, with a Star Wars comic, specifically the main run of Star Wars comics, there is a lot of dialogue in these comics, normally between in the prior run, it was between Leia and Han for the most part, and now in this it's between Leia and Lando, or Luke and Leia, that sort of thing. There's obviously a lot of dialogue I just skipped over. A lot of it is stuff that kind of brings weight to their characters. I like how Lando, you're slowly seeing him over the 2020 run of Star Wars comics change from himself being a bit more selfish and a bit more in it for himself, and him kind of realizing that doing things for the rebellion is actually something that could be really beneficial to the galaxy. And whereas before, when the rebellion all kind of started, it was like, why would anyone join the rebellion? They've got no hope. And then since then, they blew up a Death Star, they've got Luke on their side, they've got lots of little bits and pieces, and although they keep losing certain battles, it is becoming a much more viable option, and it's good seeing Lando kind of have that somewhat transformative experience at the time, and obviously seeing his relationship with Lobot, which I really like, but I have a bad feeling that Lobot is going to die before the end of this comic run, because from what I can remember, he's not in Return of the Jedi at all, and I feel like Lando would have had him on the Falcon if he was, so yeah, that's going to be probably a sad time, but that's the end of this comic run, my friends. So what have we got coming up? So next week, I should have the Rising Storm book review out. I've recorded all of it. I just need to do some editing for it. So that's going to be quite exciting. That is the Wave 1 Phase 2, adult book from the High Republic. And it's a thrilling read, and as I always do, I do the spoiler-free review, so the first half or so of the recording is spoiler-free, so anyone can listen to it. Then I give a little bit, really light spoilers for stuff that's in the first few, pages in essence, and then I give a bit more of a spoilery review of it towards the end. So however much information you're willing to take in about the High Republic novels, you can, while still having it reviewed for you in depth and me just talking about it, because some of my book reviews seem to be some of the most listened to episodes, which is very flattering. Then the week after that will be the next volume of the Star Wars 2020 run. So that's going to be the volume that then connects into these War of the Bounty Hunters comics. So that'll be that all done and dusted. So volume 2 includes issues 7 to 11. And strangely enough, issue 12 isn't in the collection of volume 2 of Star Wars. It's quite bizarre, but issue 13 is the prelude issue that I tackled in the War of the Bounty Hunters Alpha. But I looked it up and I remember that issue 12 is actually just a big flashback issue. It's just Leia talking about why she loves Han and one of the cool things he did while on the base of Hoth. So I will tackle that, but it's going to be, one of those shorter comics that doesn't have necessarily that much weight to it. It kind of feels a little bit like a filler comic, if I'm being completely honest, but it's worth a read. Then the week after that is going to be episode 79, and that's going to be the first volume of the 2020 run of Darth Vader comics by Greg Pak. So that'll give a bit more information onto what Vader did straight after Empire Strikes Back, and it will lead into the War of the Bounty Hunters. There are going to be 2 volumes of the Vader comics, so I think that by the time I finish War of the Bounty Hunters 5, then I'll have finished the Vader 2020 run as well. It'll probably be like the episode or so after that, but I'll figure out when it gets nearer the time. I may end up just doing the Vader comic before War of the Bounty Hunters 5. I don't know. I kind of figure these things out almost a week or 2 in advance, but that's generally what you can expect. And then I think the week after the Vader comic will then be the Bounty Hunters Volume 2, and then that will be linked up nicely to War of the Bounty Hunters before we do that finale. And then I think after that, I'll either do the Darth Vader comic again, or I'll then do the War of the Bounty Hunters finale. But we shall see. Aside from that, guys, please check out my Patreon, patreon.com/genuine chit-chat. For as little as £1 a month, you get access to an audio exclusive feed, and things like the book reviews normally get released on there a little bit early. If you give as little as £2 a month, then you get access to additional stuff I post on there, including photos of these comics a few days early and future guest lists and a few other bits and pieces. And it supports the show, both this show and Genuine Chit-Chat, both of which obviously I do for free. And I'm more than happy to let you guys know about all these things for free because it's a passion project, but I know some of you guys want to help contribute financially to help keep this hobby going even more. So if you fancy doing that, the link to that is in the description. As I said, there's a whole other audio feed there where you get me and Megan do a show called Afterthoughts at least once a week, and you get hours and hours of additional content a month. And at the moment we've done loads of them. I can't remember how many. We've done one a week since March. So you've got hours and hours and hours of additional content of spoiler-free movie reviews, spoiler-filled movie reviews, TV stuff reviews. We did a documentary series review. I've got 2 reviews of comics on there that I've done as well, which I think one was Death in the Family and Lonely Place of Dying, and obviously that's a Batman comic, and I also did one for 3 Jokers, which I think is spoiler-free from what I can recall. So if you want some additional bonus content and stuff, and you want to support the show, check out my Patreon. In addition to that, guys, if you're not listening on YouTube, please go over to my YouTube channel and please subscribe. I'm trying to get up to 100 subscribers so I can change the YouTube channel link to youtube.com/genuine chit-chat rather than being the big gobbledygook. So if you want to support the show but you don't want to contribute financially, please go over to YouTube and subscribe to that. I have included a link to that in the description as well. And also some of my conversations with people involving Star Wars has got video. So I had a conversation with Alex and Molly of Star Wars Explained. That has video. As I mentioned earlier, I've got a conversation recorded with Paolo Villanelli, who is a comic book artist, and I recorded the video for that as well. So that's going to be released on YouTube late on Sunday as well, which is the day after this episode drops. And there's just the stuff on there. It's basically all my Genuine Chit-Chat episodes and all my episodes of Star Wars comics in canon. Some have got video, some don't. It would mean a lot to me if you guys could go and subscribe to that. And then finally, in addition to that, make sure you check out my show, Genuine Chit-Chat, wherever you're listening to this. If you're on YouTube, you're already on the right channel. But if you're listening on a podcast app, just type in Genuine Chit-Chat into where you're listening, and then it will come up. I've had conversations with most of the guys in the Comics in Motion family. I've had conversations about movies. I've had actors, authors. I had a guy from the Church of Satan on. I've had filmmakers. I've had travelers, other podcasters, content creators. The conversation scope is quite wide. I'd be very very surprised if you could look through my back catalogue and not find any episodes that you enjoy, because there's so many out there that are so varied. It's just something for everyone. Some about mental health, some about like relationships. There's one about sex that I released recently with a Kim of the Hush podcast. So tackling almost every subject matter that you could think of. So make sure you check that out. Either subscribe on the podcast player, or if you're on YouTube, just check it out, and that would be much appreciated. But that is about it from me, guys. Thank you as always for listening. I really, really appreciate each and every one of you listening to all of my episodes of Star Wars Comics and Canon. I get loads of great feedback from you guys, but if you want to help even further, please, share on social media, review the show on Good Pods or Apple Podcasts or Podmatch, or really anywhere that you listen that you can leave reviews. Please do that. It will mean a lot to me, and spread the word of this show and also Genuine Chit-Chat to as many people as we possibly could. Shout it from the rooftops if you have to. But yeah, guys, that is it. Thank you as always for tuning in. I'll be back next week with a book review on The Rising Storm, and on Genuine Chit-Chat, I can't remember exactly what I'm going to be releasing next week, but tomorrow, the day after this episode gets released, make sure you tune into my conversation with Paolo Villanelli, and yeah, I'll talk to you guys next week. So may the Force be with you. The intro for Star Wars Comics and Canon is arranged by myself, Mike Burton, and the backing music was made by Eric Matias of soundimage.org.
You have just experienced host, creator, everything elser of Genuine Chit-Chat, and also the host and creator of Star Wars Comics and Canon, found on the Comics in Motion podcast, Mike Burton.